welcome to the Wednesday night Grumpy Sound Guy show. We are taking it indoors this week because it's about 813 degrees in the shop today, and I didn't feel like going up there and doing a video looking all sweaty like Rocky Balboa in the 12th round. You know what I'm saying? Outside is pretty much the surface of the sun right now. I think today's temperature with heat index is around, I don't know, 112, 115, something like that. So I am doing my absolute very best to stay inside. And I'm even wearing my Ocean City shirt to kind of mentally go to the beach, and to take a day here to recharge and not kill myself outside. It kind of feels like Satan's farting in my face every time I walk outside now. So this week, in the shorts, the reels, depending on what format you follow my content on, we've been talking about your band sucking and all the things that kind of go into that. In one of those shorts, I mentioned manufacturing a band. And on the TikTok channel, I had someone ask me, he said, "Hey, I'm a studio guy here. What does this mean to manufacture bands, like with auto-tune, with all the buzzer compression and all the buzzers and whistles and stuff that we have at our disposal?" And I wanted to address that because listen guys, I mean, the reality of this is you're not going to create a band, but what you can do is you can really do a great job of shellacking the icing on the cake about this thick, and mixing in a manner to where you're hiding their weaknesses and bringing forward their strengths, and that goes a long way in making the band look and sound better than they really are. Trying to really just recognize what they're doing right. Every band has at least one or two guys in the band that are legit. At least that's been my experience. Every now and then you find one that's not the case. But, even in a poorly presented band, there's usually at least one guy. He's usually the guy in there that's, belly aching and complaining to everybody how you're not doing this right and how you need to do X, Y, and Z, and maybe go check out the Grumpy Sound Guys YouTube channel. And I'd literally have had that happen to me. And I've had guys say that to me. But, when we talk about manufacturing a band, what that does is it really elevates the sound guy's job for the night to a level to where it's borderline uncomfortable. First of all, no matter what you do, because listen, we're sound reinforcement, not sound recreation. You give us crap, we're just going to make crap louder, generally, But if you got a really good, highly skilled sound guy, he can make it better. He's never going to make it correct, because we can't make you sing in key. We can't make you play the right notes. We can't make you play the correct arrangement. But what we can do is try to bring your strengths to the surface and do the best we can do to hide your weaknesses. And in that process, the sound guy never really kind of gets comfortable with the mix. So it's a high stress situation for him. I know in my world, when I'm mixing, because we do so many throw and go shows, we don't get 45-minute sound checks like the Nationals do, where they get to, run through half of their set list, and you really get to hear everything in context. Everyone's singing. You can really dial in the compression correctly, and by the time of that, you get to the end of that 45-minute sound check, you got a really nice mix, already saved, and you're just kind of in cruise control and focusing on the vocals during the actual performance, because that's really what you want your sound guy doing. You want him focusing on the vocal blends and making vocals the best they can be, because let's face it, the vocals drive the music, Now, obviously, he needs to be on top of solo boosts when a guitar player or a keyboard player or somebody in the band takes a solo, and, sprinkling all the magic pixie dust on all those things to make them the best they can be. But when you're manufacturing a band, man, you're just honking on the channel EQs like crazy, trying to bring something salvageable out of the horrible guitar tone you've been given, or a drummer that doesn't know how to tune his drums, so you're pulling all kinds of tricks out of your hat to try and help that with compression and maybe side chain gating and, some other things like that. Having a bad band on my rig really makes it a lot easier, because my microphones are going to do give me more resources and tools to be able to do those things and sprinkle that pixie dust, on the mix. But your sound guy just is never getting comfortable, man. He's back there. The mix never really gets where he wants it to be. Because usually by the middle of the first set, or 4 songs in or something like that, I'm typically starting to relax. I'm starting to enjoy the performance. I'm starting to really pour into the show, and give it everything that I have, because when I got a good band, I can make them sound great. When I have a bad band, I can usually just make them louder and put some icing on it. That's just kind of the way it works. So being on edge the entire night, especially if you're in a club scene where the band's going to play 3 sets, you get 3 sets of this nonsense to deal with. And, if your sound guy gets frustrated and just feels like no matter what he does, it just blows, it makes him feel bad, because his name is on the mix. My name is on the mix. There are people, especially in my world, because I'm such a public figure, man, there's people who are coming in and they are taking notice of what the mix is like, because they follow my content, or there's someone who follows me from gig to gig, or that sort of thing. Look, I have no ego about any of that kind of stuff, and I'm well aware that people don't come to watch me mix. At least most people don't. I've had some that do, but listen, I don't let that stuff go to my head. I know that they're there for the band. So I try to be a transparent sound guy, so that you don't notice me necessarily, unless you're part of that 3% that gets it and understands pro audio, or you play in a band and you really see the value and the skill set that I'm bringing to the table. In that scenario, then, those guys are kind of enjoying what I'm doing. But if the mix is never where I want it, and I just get angry, it really plays into the whole grumpiness thing that all of us sound guys get stereotyped with. And it's like, we're grumpy because you blow, dude, because there's layers of stupidity going on here with you people. Every guitar patch is a different volume, so I've got to chase that around. That's part of manufacturing a band, so that the guitars sound even on every song and the solos boost up where they're supposed to, and that sort of thing. Or you got somebody who's crazy loud on stage and has no regard for the vocal mix, especially if it's a loud drummer. A loud drummer is basically just telling the vocalist he could give a rip less if anybody ever hears him sing, and I mean, I'm a loud drummer, so believe me, I get that scenario, and it's why my bands don't play super small rooms. We try to play in bigger rooms and outdoor events where we can all just play comfortably. So I've adjusted my band's expectations because of that, so that I don't put a sound guy in a situation where his back's kind of up against the wall and he's just not having fun. And look, I know we're getting paid to be there, and this is a job, and there's days where we just don't want to be there. There's days where it's not fun. I get that, I get that. But when it's something that you feel is preventable, because if the band would just rehearse, man, I can't tell you how many bands, and I mean, I know bands that's been together for years, some bands can get away without rehearsing. Let me say that, okay? Like when the last classic rock band that I was in, we were doing 100 dates a year or whatever. We played out every Friday and Saturday night, and we got together like maybe once every 6 weeks, basically just hung out and barbecued and ate food and drank alcohol. But if we were going to work up a new song, we would call a rehearsal or something like that. But when you're playing out week after week after week, you don't need to rehearse. If you have legitimately talented guys in the band who know how to do their homework and know how to be in a band and gel as one musical entity on stage. But some of these bands, and this is what I was getting at a second ago, is, these guys have been together for, in some cases, decades, and they just throw stuff together and they go out there and do it, and it sounds thrown together when you're on stage. So then a sound guy has to take that mess and try to make sense out of it somehow. He's got to try to make this, I always call it sonic chaos, and somehow turn it into some form of art. And I think that's what really separates good sound guys from bad sound guys. I know guys that can, that are fortunate enough to work in a venue where they mix good bands all the time, and they have a great reputation of being a good sound guy because they mix really good bands all the time. The better the band is, the easier it is to make them sound good. But you take a guy who's out here doing combat audio from week to week, and has to work with these challenging bands that don't have their crap together. I'll take that guy over the other guy any day of the week, because he's had to, trudge his way through the swamps of horrible tone and people singing out of key, whisper singers with loud drummers, drummers that can't keep time, guys that just legitimately get lost in the middle of songs. And then some of these cats are coming to the table still living like it's 1987, and they show up at the gig and they're plastered, dude. Or by the end of the night, they're plastered. By the middle of the second set, they're plastered, They're either, high on drugs, or they're drunk, or there's something like that. And man, I just don't have a bunch of respect for guys like that, because I respect the art form of playing music. I'm also a musician. I'm not just a sound engineer. I'm not just a production company owner. I'm someone who genuinely loves music. I had a band this past weekend at Camden Yards. We're doing the Orioles baseball team. We're doing their summer concert series. We do all their Saturday home games here in Baltimore. And we had a band, Reverend Smackmaster and the Congregation of Funk, which, by the way, is the greatest band name ever, okay? And these guys, I knew Ricky Wise, the drummer, really well, and the bass player in the band, I mixed in another band, so I knew a couple of the guys in the band. It's like an 8 or 9 piece horn band, funk band, just everything that you think the title would give you is what they are, and then some. And they just murdered, man. They just killed it, absolutely killed it. And I had my A2, who I'm trying to give more and more responsibility to, and I'm trying to really kind of push him out of the boat a little bit to go walk on the water some with some of these bands. And, he was killing it, man, out front with the mix, not just because they were a great band, but because his skill set's really developing in a healthy way. And I went out there with him at one point, was listening to the mix and, giving him some props, and like, man, it was such a great mix, man. You're doing a great job, and that sort of thing. But I looked at him and I said, this whole world's a whole lot easier when the band don't suck, doesn't it? And he just looked at me and laughed, because he's a musician. He's a bass player and has a music degree and all that kind of stuff. And he's a super talented guy. But man, what a difference it makes to have an amazing, amazing band on stage that's locked together. They start and stop in all the right places, and I mean, the drummer was at the front of the stage, because the drummer and a female vocalist fronts the band, and Ricky's well known in the Baltimore scene as being a phenomenal singer on top of a phenomenal drummer. So this stage plot was kind of backwards from what we're used to seeing. And he was even turning around, because I was A2ing that day. He was really turning around and shouting cues to the horn section and to the rhythm section. I mean, it was all like spot on, man, spot on. That's a scenario where we are having the time of our life. I think I told somebody after the show, I said, I've never made so much stink face in all my life. It's just like, God, yeah, that's it right there, man. That's it. That's what I'm talking about. Man, that's what we should all be striving for as a band, We should all be striving for that unified, work of art that we bring to the stage, instead of just 4 or 5 guys standing up there playing as individuals. And yeah, you might start the song in the same place, and you might even end it in the same place, but all the crap in the middle is just all over the place, I mean, so that makes us as sound guys have to try and correct that to the best of our ability. We'll layer tons of vocal effects on top of a guy that's, not singing in key. A lot of times, if I have a backing vocalist who is singing out of key, I just cut it right out of the mix, man. And that's manufacturing the band. That's trying to bring their strengths to the surface and trying to hide their weaknesses. But it is zero fun working with those kind of bands. It just is, man. It really is. It's no fun to have to sit there and be tense all night. Not to mention, when you're me and everyone knows me everywhere I go, they're all coming to me like, hey, dude, what is going on with this? And it's like, then I'm in a weird position where, I can't deny the fact that there's issues on stage. But I'm also working for this client, and I'm not trying to say anything negative about them, even if it's justified. So there's a bunch of times that people are coming to me like, man, these guys are really rough. They know how I mix. They come to my shows all the time and that sort of thing. But, they're kind of wanting me to jump on that bandwagon of trashing a band that's struggling, and I'm just not that guy. I'm not someone who wants to do that, even if I'm frustrated. I'm just like, there it is. You make up your mind, whatever it is, it is. I'm doing my very best to, make them the best they can be. And I mean, there's been times where I remember many, many years ago, it was probably going back, I don't know, 15 years ago, I was playing an event with a promoter who was dead set on bringing his buddy's dad band in to open up for us. We were headlining. And, I'm standing out front I wasn't doing production that day. I was just playing drums in the headlining band. And I'm standing out front with, with the front of house guy. And the promoter comes over to me about halfway through the set. And he's like, dude, this sound guy is just destroying this band. And I looked at him and I said, no, he's not. I said, I have went and seen this band twice before this show just to kind of have a feel of what, we were working with. And this band sounds like this no matter who's running sound. They're just not a good band. And he kind of looked at me like he'd been shot at and missed or something or whatever. But I'm just like, dude, I'm not trying to talk smack about the band. This is your buddy's band. You wanted to give them this opportunity. By the way, we had a crowd of about 6,000 or 8,000 people that day. I said, I'm trying to respect your opinion. You're the guy writing the check. I have no opinion. I mean, it is what it is. But don't you dare come up here attacking our production people because you think that they're trashing this band. No, dude, this band is horrible, and that's why this is what they sound like. If you don't believe me, go see them next weekend at the club down the street. So I don't have a whole lot of tolerance for that, I mean, learn to play your instruments, dude. Rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. And, I said this in my opening short this week. I said, you know what? Maybe there just comes a point where you need to realize that this ain't your thing, man. This ain't your thing. I hear golf is tons of fun, even disc golf, or maybe you need to get into race cars, or maybe you need to just find another hobby, dude, okay? Or, I'll even throw this out there because I'm trying to be a super generous guy today. Or maybe you need to go to your local rock school and have them help cultivate your band into something that can truly be special. If you are dead set on like, dude, this is my dream, this is what I've always wanted to do, and you decided not to get into it until you were in your mid-40s or something like that or whatever, then go get some instruction. Go take lessons, get your band in an environment where guys like me or other experienced, seasoned guys can look at your band and say, okay, here, do this, this, and this. I have bands that are clients of mine because I'm well known for grooming bands. I have bands that are clients of mine that kind of started out that way, and I could give you their names right now off the top of my head. And they were a little rough. They were a little rough, but they were humble. And they came to me and they said, JR, what can we do to be better? And with a kind heart, I gave them constructive criticism, show after show after show after show. And they went home and they took that criticism seriously. And they started making adjustments to their band. Those bands right now have now developed into some of the best bands on the scene, in the cover band scene. Because they just had a humble heart. They wanted it that bad that they were willing to set their ego aside, because none of these bands I'm talking about had any ego. They were just regular, common folk like me and you. And I gave them advice on marketing. I gave them advice on musical stuff. And when they started getting it together, I was real quick about opening the door to some of my contacts and getting them in rooms that they probably would have never got into any other way, because I know they've done the work and I know they're not going to disappoint me when they go do the gig. There's a lot of things to benefit from here, if you're going to really do the work and do your band correctly. You have everything to gain by getting all the sound guys in your corner. Because let me tell you something, if they're a sound guy at a venue, they're a house sound guy, they have probably the most influence than anyone else in the room to the powers to be that actually write the checks and hire the bands. Their opinion is what's going to sway them about what band they're going to book and what band they're not going to book. So you always want to be friends with the sound guy. You always want to be super nice to the sound guy. And you always want to listen to his criticism. You know, ask him to give you a critique, and then don't be butthurt when he tells you the truth. Because most of the time, those guys are musicians. At the very least, they're somebody who probably mixes 150, 200 bands a year. They see a lot of bands. And, if you do that for, 10, 15, 20, 35 years in my case, then you start to see patterns float to the surface of what bands are successful, what that formula looks like, and what they do to really keep people coming in the door and become some of the best bands in the area. Like I said, you got everything to gain by being friends with the sound guy. So that's what it means to manufacture a band. That's what sound guys think about. It was way too long. I forget who the person was on TikTok that asked me that. I will go over and tell them to come watch this week's show so they can get an answer to it. It was too much to type. It deserved its own video, and I kind of wanted to touch base with you guys about that and let you know what our world looks like when we have challenging musicians on stage. And I'll end with this. Check your ego at the door, okay? It never ceases to amaze me, and I'm pretty sure I have this in one of this week's shorts or reels or whatever. It never ceases to amaze me that the guys with the biggest egos are the guys that can only put 30 people into place and sound horrible. Typically, the guys that are selling the place out and can really play their instruments and are really solid bands, they're typically humble, easy to work with kind of bands, and they speak the language of pro audio, and they understand how to communicate their needs. And their band and all their, bass tone, guitar tone, keyboard patches, drum, tone, drum set being tuned correctly and things like that. All that stuff has been addressed before they ever showed up at the gig. It's the guys who don't do any of that stuff and show up, and then when it's not everything they want it to be, then they immediately want to blame the sound guy. Well, you guys can go pound dirt as far as I'm concerned, because you're not going to go to a sound guy that's mixing 180 shows a year and tell him he's the problem when the other 179 shows he does that year has no issue. The only common denominator in that formula is you. Have a great week. Love you guys.